Members of the public, welcome to the 23rd of March Ordinary Council meeting. Could I ask us all to be upstanding for the civic affirmation and the acknowledgement of country, please? Councillor O'Connor. Councillor Gillespie.
The civic affirmation. We, the councillors of Armidale Region, declare that we will undertake the duties of the office of council in the best interests of the community and faithfully, impartially carry out the functions, powers, authorities and discretions vested in us to the best of our skills and judgment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gillespie. Councillor Mepham.
Recognition of traditional owners. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to those past, present and emerging. The Armidale regional community pays tribute to their love of land, love of people and love of culture.
Thank you. Please all be seated. Could I ask the General Manager on screen to make a statement in relation to live streaming and mobile phones?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This meeting is being audio recorded and the recordings of the non-confidential parts of the meeting will be made available on the internet. No other persons are permitted to record the meeting unless specifically authorised to do so. And if we could just ask people to set their mobile phones, either turn them off or set them to silent, please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Next, I have apologies and applications for leave of absence. I have not received any, although I note that Councillor Redwood is attending online, as is the General Manager. Next, Councillors' disclosures of interest. Having reviewed the agenda, do any councillors need to declare a conflict of interest? Councillor Robinson. Councillor Packham, you might just have to...
Yeah. Having read the agenda, I would like to declare that I'm a part owner of land that could conceivably be affected by the change to the LEP proposal in 9.2. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Packham.
Mr. Mayor, as a rural land owner in the region, I would have the opportunity to engage in the initiatives being presented in item 9.2 should the motion be successful, and would like to declare a non-pecuniary interest. Being a matter of standard planning amendment, I intend to participate in the discussion and vote on the motion so put.
Thank you, Councillor Packham. Councillor O'Connor.
Am I allowed to say what he said? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I have the same involvement in that. I'm part owner of rural land, but I don't see that as a substantial conflict.
Terrific. Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. We'll just move now to confirm the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting held on 23 February 2022. So can I call for a mover of that, please? Thank you, Councillor McMichael, a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Widders. Any comment or discussion on the agenda? All right, let's put that to a vote to accept those minutes. All those in favour? Thank you. That's... I assume Councillor Redwood. Councillor Redwood, can you just cough or do something so that you appear on screen?
Sorry, I was putting my hand up, but got my virtual hand up as well.
Terrific, thank you. All right, I declare that the minutes from 23 February are carried unanimously. We're good. Thank you. We just now move to the items 6. There are 2 mayoral minutes to consider. So the first one is item 6.1 around the federal election campaign. So the Australian Local Government Association has developed an advocacy program to run in the lead up to the federal election to secure funding and policy commitments that will help our region share in the benefits of the post-pandemic recovery. All Australian councils have been encouraged to participate in this campaign. Details of it are in our business papers. So as chair, I move that we adopt this minute, and consequently I'd like to put that to a vote. All those in favour of doing that? Thank you. I declare that carried unanimously. The second mayoral minute is around deferring the ordinary council meetings for April 2022 and June 2022. So in this minute, I am seeking to defer the April meeting by 1 day as a result of Anzac Day falling on a Monday, which is when we would usually have our GM briefing. If we can push this out to the Thursday, that will allow us sufficient time to, consider what's been said in the GM briefing. And then for the June meeting, I'm seeking to defer that by 1 week to allow council to be represented at the Australian Local Government Association conference. As chair, I move that we adopt this minute and would like to put that to a vote. So all those in favour? Aye. Thank you. We'll declare that that carried unanimously. We'll move now to the 8 section. So this is tabling of disclosure of pecuniary interests. Council is being asked to note the tabling of the disclosures of pecuniary interests and other matters by each of the 11 councillors. All of that information is provided in our agenda and the associated attachments. I call for a mover for this. Thank you, Councillor O'Connor, and a second to thank you, Councillor Gallatley. Councillor O'Connor, would you like to speak? No, thank you. No, and we'll put this to a vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That's, again, carried unanimously. At 8.2, the councillor and staff interaction policy. This policy governs the respectful, transparent and constructive interactions between councillors and council staff. The policy has been on public exhibition for 28 days from the 17th of January, and detail is on page 12 of the agenda. So council is being asked to adopt this policy. Can I call for a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Witters, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Gadders. Councillor Witters, would you like to speak to this at all?
Not a lot to say to it, just that points in this need to be remembered by all councillors, and whenever they need to refer back to this policy.
Thank you, Councillor Witters. Councillor Gadders, nothing there. Any other councillors would you like to comment? All right, let's put this to a vote. All those in favour of adopting the policy, raise your hands, please. Thank you. That's, again, carried unanimously. We're now to come to item 8.3, which is around the Code of Meeting Practice. So council is being asked to note 3 submissions received during the public exhibition and adopt the Code of Meeting Practice. I note that these submissions all related to making the General Manager briefings open to the public. At a personal level, I understand the desire for transparency, but I am of the view that we will deliver much better outcomes if councillors are able to interrogate staff in private, in the knowledge that the staff have their opinions and confidences respected. So I call for a mover of this Code of Meeting Practice. Thank you, Councillor Witters, and a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor McMichael. Councillor Witters, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, I will. Those who have followed my journey within the council know I'm a big fan of the Code of Meeting Practice, and I believe it provides a surety for good governance. I do note the submissions that we received, the 3 submissions, just in regards to the GM briefing. And I'm going to leave that part of the Code of Meeting Practice for the discussion, and then if I've got anything else to say about it, I'll come back to it with my right of reply.
Terrific. Thank you, Councillor Witters. Councillor McMichael, would you like to add anything?
Just to say that, yes, I too noted the submissions for the staff, for people being involved with the staff for the GM's briefings, and that though we appreciate that people want to be involved in the public discussion of them, I think that this council would aim to make these meetings transparent, that there are a number of avenues. There are minutes that are provided by council staff. There are the Facebook page. There are your councillors to whom the council, that members of the public can speak to. And if there is some other way in which we can provide information to the public, as councillors, we are happy to look at doing that. But I agree with the Commission.
Thank you, Councillor McMichael. I'd like to throw this open to others that might like to comment. Councillor O'Connor.
Oh, do you want to go next?
Yeah.
Oh.
No, I just had mine first and I turned it off. Sorry, I should be speaking.
I'd like to go. Councillor O'Brien.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Look, I just wanted to say I struggled greatly with this one and had a number of conversations with people in the community, and I'm still a little torn on this. However, I've come, I think, after these discussions to see great value in a capacity to really interrogate issues that we may act differently if there are people observing. I know we shouldn't act differently, but human nature being, we will probably not want to embarrass people or be difficult with people. I think we might end up making better decisions if we could actually be really frank and fearless. And I know in other levels of government, they do have that advice behind the scenes. I also think if we follow the code of meeting practice properly, we won't make any decisions in there. Any discussions that councillors, when they come out of there, still feel are unresolved, they still have the capacity to debate and argue it in the council chambers. I don't think anyone's going to be shut down by these debates or hide anything. So on the balance of things, I've come to the conclusion that we would be better off having them in closed session, but I do have taken, as you all have, because we've discussed it deeply, the concerns of the public here, and we should all really keep a close eye out on that is conducted in a way that is aligned with our code of meeting practice. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor O'Connor.
Oh, well, I actually want to speak against the motion. Look, I perfectly recognise the benefits of, having a closed door mud wrestle, if you'd like to put it in colloquial terms, with, our wonderful council officers. But I think we actually resolved that at our last General Manager's briefing session, where we did have the public, and I've got used to those members of the public being there, and I enjoy having them there. I think we resolved it by putting some matters back into a private or committee of whole, whatever you want to call it, discussion. Maybe that was done in an informal way, but it utterly resolved the issue from my point of view. Because I believe that we were able to have the mud wrestle where we needed it. But on the other hand, we had the enormous benefit of having serious-minded, interested and very, very well-informed members of the public there. And I note that it was one of the recommendations of the performance improvement order that was placed on the previous council, that such meetings be held in public. And I think we're at a time in the council where we really need to do everything we can. The pendulum should swing on the side of transparency and openness at this point in time. We haven't really recovered the confidence of the public yet, and I think that having this meeting open is better than having it closed to the public. I'll therefore be voting against the resolution as set out in the papers.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Robinson.
Well, rather than actually having a vote now, let's just maybe settle the matter of whether the pre-meeting briefing should be open to the public by, I'll move an amendment that we accept the Code of Meeting Practice subject to pre-meeting briefings being open to the public, if I can get a seconder, and then we can just vote on that issue, and then we can vote on the rest of the Code of Meeting Practice.
All right, so we now have an amendment on foot, moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor O'Connor. We'll just wait for that to come up. Councillor Robinson, does that accord with what you...
Yes, now we've got adopted in there, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the amendment is that the Code of Meeting Practice be adopted, subject to the GM business paper briefing being open to the public.
Yeah, now, if I may, I'll just speak to it very, very briefly. Because, again, I was in the previous council whereby this was part of the performance improvement order. And the reason it was there was because certain people, for some reason, thought we were making decisions at workshops and briefings, when in fact that was totally incorrect. But it does help having the transparency of having other witnesses there to prove that what we were doing was totally above board. And also, given the submissions from the public in favour of this practice and our commitment to transparency and accountability, I think we should consider very carefully before shutting them out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor O'Connor, anything to add to what you've said previously?
I have got this thing to add, but I've forgotten what it is. But I think it goes... Yeah, now I've remembered it. I knew I would if I started. So here we go. Thank you for your patience, everybody.
We all benefit from that.
Oh, you will indeed. Look, we have the ability to change the Code of Meeting Practice and actually reverse this amendment if we need to. So I think we may be kind of running a bit on fear. The situation that we have at the moment is working really well. We've got both transparency, we've got pretty rigorous and respectful and lengthy discussion and information flowing, which doesn't flow as easily under the constraints of an ordinary council meeting with the Code of Meeting Practice and all the rules of debate for an ordinary council meeting. So there's a real benefit to having, really committed people, and you've got to be committed to sit through with great respect to the General Manager. You've got to be really committed and serious to sit through the General Manager's briefing paper. If we got to the point where there was, it was disruptive or there were difficulties with that, we could change our decision. But I really recommend to my colleagues here, let's keep this the way it is so that we can continue to benefit from the transparency and also the exchange of ideas that can come from the public as a result of a few people sitting through that and knowing what's going on. And as I said before, if we need to talk about something in confidence, we can, as we did last Monday.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. Anyone else to speak on this amendment? Councillor Packham.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's my recollection that members of the previous council worked hard, were actually adamant that the performance improvement order no longer applied to them. And so to encompass that, or to bring this as one aspect of that is, a little bit cheap, I think. But moreover, I want to echo what Councillor McMichael said. Our outreach programs have been extraordinary and on the improve since the new council, as a collective, came to bear. And I think that with Facebook, with press releases, with just the general communication with all councillors, with the constituents, that we're actually doing a better job of being able to say, listen, we had a strong and robust discussion with staff and we came out with some good outcomes that we are in a position to be able to debate openly and transparently in front of the public. And so I'd like to rest my case there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Packham. If there are no other, I can't see any red lights. You'd like to speak to the amendment?
Yeah, to the amendment. No, leave the amendment where it is. I like it. Am I right to reply?
Thank you. We're on the amendment at the moment, so let's go to a vote on the amendment as it appears highlighted there on the screen. All those in favour of the amendment, please. That's 2. All those against? That's 2. I declare that the amendment lost. So we now go back to the original motion as moved by Councillor Witters. Councillor Witters, would you like your right of reply?
Yes, I would. I'd just like to support the comments made by Councillors O'Brien, Packham and McMichael with what they said, and I've got my own notes here. My understanding of the GM's briefings becoming open to public was that in the last council, which I was a part of, there were a few issues of transparency of how decisions were being made, and also issues of behaviours within certain meetings. And opening that meeting up to the public sort of put everyone on notice, gave the public a chance to really scrutinise their representatives, which I think was a good idea. And that was put in under the PIO. Now that the PIO is finished and the community has voted again, I think this group of councillors deserves to have the trust of the community put within them. As I said, having watched and been involved in meetings and being disgusted by some of the behaviours that were in it on the previous council, I'm very heartened by what goes on now. I think the way meetings are run nowadays and briefings and everything else, I think there's a lot of respect shown to each other in the councillors and to the staff as well. So I think it's also an all or nothing thing. If you're going to have the GM's briefings open to the public, you might as well have all the briefings open to the public so everyone knows and understands exactly what goes on, because they're not the only briefings that we receive. So I think if we do our job properly here, the chance for openness and transparency and people seeing us being diligent in our duties will get shown on the live feed. Got a couple more here. No, I've already said. And also the Code of Meeting Practice and Code of Conduct applies to all briefings and general meetings. So the behaviours we put on here should apply to all the other ones. So we shouldn't need people nowadays to watch us, because we're all well adversed in those 2 points of whatever they are, legislation, whatever it's called. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Witters. Councillors, I'd like to put the motion as moved by Councillor Witters to a vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. So that's 10. Those against, 1. So I declare the motion carried. Thank you. And I do note what I would like to assure the public that the councillors genuinely considered all of this. And I think as Councillor O'Connor pointed out, we do have it within our power to adopt to change the Code of Meeting Practice if need be. So if at some point it becomes apparent that we need to change to the majority of councillors, then we are able to do so. Thank you, councillors. Let's move to item 8.4, the Councillor Expense and Facilities Policy. So a draft policy has been on public exhibition for 28 days, with 1 submission request for inclusion, that being a payment per kilometre for any council-related travel undertaken on foot or bicycle. Council is being asked to adopt the draft policy. I'd like to call for a mover of this, Councillor Robinson.
Well, I'd like to move a slightly amended motion, which I believe should be on the screen if I ask for it.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. We'll put...
Yeah, that's the motion that I'd like to move, if I can get a seconder.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Robinson, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, very briefly. I mean, I am somewhat disappointed we weren't able to take account of the public submission by SLA to include bicycle and foot travel on official business, because I believe that is something that is really, really important. But we do have an application, a grant application in, I believe, to update the bicycle, cycling and walking strategy. And that may be an opportunity to review the whole thing, both for expenses of staff and expenses of councillors at the same time. So maybe we'll get another opportunity to do that at a later point. And the other things are very, very minor amendments, because it's really important that councillors keep up to date with what's happening in our community and support our local paper. So we're not actually asking for any increases in the expenses, just simply be able to make them, distribute them more efficiently by in your home office limit allowing a subscription to the local paper, because it's a bit vague as to whether this was or wasn't allowed in the previous policy. And also maybe we don't want to increase IT expenses, but sometimes things don't always happen as you'd like them in the first year. So if you don't spend your allowance in the first year, why not allow it to be carried over for future years rather than having to make decisions in haste? And also, as a simple administrative issue, if you've got claims of less than $100, let's allow 6 months so that we don't have to make 2 claims of $50. It just adds to the administration expense. And at the same time, I would hope that we can review the proposed budget for 2022-23 to see if we can make any savings without affecting the quality of representation or training or professional development, because these are very, very important. But if we can make savings for the community, then we've got more money to spend on the community. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor O'Brien, would you like...
Just to say, Councillor Robinson's made a good case and I commend her amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Packham, would like to speak?
Mr Mayor, I'd like to speak against the proposed amendment. I feel that we should have put the motion to the original draft up as first and seconded in the first place, but I'd like to take a little bit of issue here with what home office expenses are. And it's clearly not publications and subscriptions, which is a normal line item in anyone's budget. I think that the second issue I have with that is a subscription to a local paper. What is local paper? Is it the Argus? Is it the Community Rag? Is it the Armidale Express? Is it whatever it is? And where is the limit on this being placed? I have a subscription to the Charter as a chartered accountant, and I think that provides me with a broad range of issues in local government and accounting that serves me stead for this office. I think that's part of my professional development, and I think that that's what I bring to the table, and I think that's what my constituents expect me to bring to the table, is those skills, and expect me to sometimes take a little bit out of my pocket to do so. I think the ICT expenses were very generous. The organisation has provided me with this very sexy and upstanding laptop at $3,000 in total expense. I don't see any need. It's either I had to supply that to come here or they've supplied it. It also comes with a fully loaded SIM card, so I have no data expense that goes with that, no matter where I am in Australia. It is a full roaming. I don't even have to use my NBN from home subscription to do that. I think it's very generous. And my last point on the Amendment B, and I do, recognise where we're going there, is that the 2023 budget has to be based on needs and priorities. And at this point in time, we haven't even determined what those needs and priorities are. So I'm worried about what there is to review at this point. I think that if councillors feel that there's an item of support that we require at the time that we determine the budget, and it's a priority and a need, that's the time that we will redetermine where we can potentially move some line items or support councils in the appropriate way for their representation. So my reply is that I don't support the amendment. I actually support the very generous package that is put before us in the draft, and which outside of the transportation line, which was brought up by Dorothy, which is intended for potentially beyond commuting distances, like, okay, 10 kilometres, more than commute, that there was no other public rebuke of what was on offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Packham. Any other? Councillor Galletley?
I'm against this amendment as well. I put my hand up because I was in a position to represent the community, and I do feel sorry for those people that probably need the money to survive as a councillor. But I think all of us are pretty well, the majority of us should have put a hand up to represent the community, and I haven't claimed a cent on any of this in the last 4 years that I've been here, and I actually find it offensive that people actually do. But on any sporting club, any other organisation you're on, you put your hand up, you do your work, and you carry on. I think it's a little bit rude claiming, but anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Galletley. Councillor McMichael.
I'm not quite sure where this fits in, but I do think that these kind of motions are about equity. So you may not have to claim something, but you can, and all of us can. The point about the local newspaper, I suppose, as a local, as a council, is that we are in the region, part of the region. The paper does publicity about the region and allows us to find out what's happening in our region, which we represent. So, notwithstanding the usefulness of other subscriptions, to which I have a number too, but nonetheless, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McMichael. Councillor O'Connor.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything, but Councillor Galletley said something that I just think needs another viewpoint added to it, and that is that this is not about what we can afford or not afford. This is about having a fair policy, and I support the amendment, especially the looking at reviewing the conferencing area, which I don't think is satisfactory. But fundamentally, this is about making it possible for people from any walk of life to put their hand up to be a councillor. You don't have to be a rich retiree or whatever. You can be someone who's... The idea of this is that you don't have to be wealthy to put your hand up to run for council, and I think we should never lose sight of that.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Look, I think Councillor O'Connor's sort of taken my points, but I do think I always consider who's coming after us. And I also think it's not about thinking about what you can afford. You have to also think about how we might embrace, I suppose, a broader and wider demographic that comes in here. And I always think of the people after us. Not everybody here is well off. I mean, I shouldn't say it all over town, but I'm broke for a start. I didn't come on council to make money, obviously, but I do think in some ways it is a job, and we should be in some ways not go into debt over it. But I don't really care for myself, but I do think we shouldn't kind of denigrate those who can't, maybe might struggle to make the expenses of being on council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Witters.
Thanks for the chat, everyone. I'm a little bit conflicted on Part B in regards to the amendment. Part A, the first three sections of it seem reasonable. Part B, I'm not quite sure what it's trying to achieve. I think Councillor Packham may have mentioned something. The 22-23 budget, how it's still got to come along and everything else to be reviewed. It hasn't even been written up yet, so how it can be reviewed is a little bit perplexing to the old noggin. So if the mover of the amendment can explain Part B, it may help me in my decisions on whether to support the amendment as written or decline its involvement in the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Witters. Councillor Robinson, would you like to either explain to Councillor Witters or consider whether you would remove Part B?
Well, what we can do is vote for one, A and B separately, and that will allow Councillor Witters to vote against B if he likes. The reason for putting in B is that the business paper has a very, very large sum in expenses for councillors projected for the 2022-23 year. And I really, really hope we don't actually spend anything like that amount. And it would be far better to review that, as I'm sure we will anyway, before we actually adopt the budget for 2022-23. But I'm certainly happy to vote for them in seriatim if that will help.
Thank you. So Councillor Robinson would like to split those into an A and a B, and Councillor Robinson and Councillor O'Brien, you seconded? I seconded it. And are you happy with that to be split? Back through the chair, he has said it probably would. Thank you. Councillors, there being no further discussion, let's proceed to a vote on Part A, Part B. Those in favour of Part A, please raise your hands. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I declare Part A carried. You good? Okay. Councillors, let's move to Part B, if we're able to get that up on the screen, please. And that is that the proposed budget for 22-23 is reviewed to see if any savings can be made without affecting the quality of representation or training and professional development. Councillors, let's put that to a vote. Those in favour of Part B, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Those against is the rest. So let's call that 8-3. So I declare Part B lost. Happy? Thank you. Thank you, councillors. That was meaningful debate. Thank you. We'll move now to item 8.5, the Council Actions Report. So this report summarises the actions taken on resolutions of Council. Council is asked to note this report. Can I call for a mover? Thank you, Councillor O'Connor, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Gadders. Councillor O'Connor, is there anything you would like to?
Only to say that this is pretty handy. Thank you very much for doing it, and it has led to a bit more transparency, which I think is fab. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Gadders, anything to add? Councillors, any discussion? If there is no discussion, I'm not seeing any lights on. Let's move to a vote to note the Council Actions Report. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. I declare that carried unanimously. We now move into the 9 series. So the first one, 9.1, public exhibition of proposed lease to UNE of a road reserve for the purpose of paid parking. So this is a renewal of an existing lease agreement, and Council is asked to endorse the proposed lease for public exhibition for a period of 28 days and receive a further report at the conclusion of the exhibition period. Do I have a mover for this? Thank you, Councillor Robinson, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor McMichael. Councillor Robinson, would you like to speak on this?
And I'll just reserve my right of reply. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any other councillors, starting with Councillor McMichael, like to speak? No. Thank you. Well, let's put this to a vote. All those in favour, please. Thank you. I declare that carried unanimously. Item 9.2, Agritourism Amendment Order. So this item is an opportunity for Council to boost tourism and showcase our region by permitting, with consent, agritourism, farm experience and farm gate experience in zones that have some form of permissible agriculture. Done well, this could provide farmers with an alternative source of income, and details can be found from page 27 in the agenda. We have a recommendation on the screen. Can I ask for a mover of this? Thank you, Councillor Packham. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor McMichael. So, Councillor Packham, would you like to?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment for a Part B, please.
Thank you, Councillor Packham. I believe we've got one on screen coming up. So, for the benefit of those watching from home and abroad, no doubt, I'll just read that amendment, and that is to add a Part B to the recommendation, and that is, once the amendments to the LEP are made, deliver an industry promotions package to inform farmers of opportunities enabled by the new LEP, including provisions of planning concierge services to assist with any required development application processes. Councillor Packham, would you like to speak further to what's on the screen?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I can't speak more highly of council staff grasping this initiative to broaden opportunities for both the agricultural and tourism sectors in the same breath, and to be the facilitator and enabler of this initiative is to be applauded. To then optimise the opportunity with a service that assists our farming community to engage in the agritourism space, in my mind, is a win-win for the sector and the region's aspirations of jobs and a stronger economy, and hence my recommendation for the amendment to proceed to vote.
Thank you, Councillor Packham. Councillor McMichael, as a seconder, do you support the...
Yes.
Thank you. That was Councillor McMichael supports that amendment. Councillors, I'll throw that for discussion. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I understand that our code of meeting practice says that when we're putting any discussion or debate up for voting on it, we'd actually need to have a costed proposal. So I just wondered if there's been any costing of the additional industry promotion package, or is it going to be part of our routine delivery program anyway? Thank you.
Thank you. I will take that through me. As the GM is absent, I'll throw to our Chief Officer Sustainable Development to answer. Councillor O'Connor, could you...
Thank you, Mr Mayor, through you. Councillor, I guess it depends on the scale of the promotion package, but I think we would certainly have the in-house capability to promote that, and obviously defer to Darren for any additional comments. In terms of the planning concierge services, again, depending on the volume of applications, and putting that caveat on it, we would certainly have the capacity in-house at the moment to provide that.
Thank you, Chief Officer Boyce. Councillor O'Connor.
I just wanted to raise the same point that Councillor Robinson had, given that we've now passed the code of meeting practice. Notwithstanding that, I just wanted to add that what I mentioned in the General Manager's briefing, that I think the local land care group, Southern New England Land Care, ran a very, very successful publicity session about agritourism, and such partnerships might be considered as part of what we do in fulfilment of Councillor Packham's amendment, which I support.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. Councillors, there being no other... Oh, sorry, Councillor Gilletley.
Just
couldn't see the red light amongst your shirt.
Thank you, Mayor Sam. I know the feeling. I get a little bit blinded by it myself when I look up there when I'm on screen. But anyway, that's it. I can see I've got a little bit of blood pressure there too on the screen. I don't know if I look quite, but anyway, we won't go down that path. But But look, this is a pretty good thing for the cow cockies, mate. Especially along the railway line, if we can get the rail trail in there, they can diversify. As they've said, with the land owners around here are very lucky they've got the res here that they can diversify and get a bit of income coming from the wind and the solar stuff. This is good because this won't take up any land or anything like that. They can get tourists coming in for their overnight stays, and I think for tourism it will just be a great thing. It'll give the people along the line a bit of an opportunity to have a nice Sydney family there and show them what the country life's like. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Galletley. Councillor Witters.
Considering we're discussing Councillor Packham's amendment to the original motion to begin with, and noting Councillor Robinson and O'Connor's concerns about the Code of Meeting Practice, would Councillor Packham be willing to put in some extra words to make it fit around the Code of Meeting Practice? So a bit along the lines of, if it's I just had it worded in my head. I should have wrote it down. Something that says to look at as Chief. What are you going to, Dan? What's your position? The planner Boyce has said we do have the capabilities to do it in-house, but something that says whether, instead of saying that we will do it, that we will investigate to do it so that it can be done properly inside the Code of Meeting Practice, if my sort of thing makes sense, so that the wording of it fits within the Code of Meeting Practice. Then I have nothing against it, just so that we fit inside that.
Councillor Witters, perhaps if it was something that it's within current resources, we've got the capacity within current resources to do it, would that satisfy you? Councillor Packham is acknowledged that would be acceptable within current resources. Yes, you're not asking for extra.
Mr. Mayor, I think, I'm not in the operations, but I think that once the package is developed, it will make it more sustainable and more efficient to handle development applications going forward. So part of that process is to upload or front load our capacity, which then makes it easier, and we're not doing things in such a ad hoc basis. We'll have custom and practice. We have the ability to know what knowns, unknown and unknowns. And so I think that it will not be a resource-hungry exercise, and hence I put forward that amendment as originally written.
Thank you, Councillor Packham. Councillors, having had discussion, I suggest we vote on the entirety, which is what Councillor Packham, we had a recommendation on the screen. Councillor Packham moved to add Part B to that recommendation. So can I see a show of hands? All those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. How do we go?
With respect, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, but I think that is an amendment. The amendment's passed, so anyway.
Thank you. I declare that carried unanimously. All right. Item 9.3, the Cash and Investment Report. This report provides an overview of cash and investments for the month to 28 February. The details are on page 32 of the agenda. Council is being asked to note the report and the updated end-of-year forecasts. Can I call for a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor McMichael, and Councillor Gadders is seconding that. Councillor McMichael, any comment you wish to make? Councillor Gadders, no. Councillors, let's move to a vote on this to accept, to note the report. All those in favour? Thank you. We'll declare that carried unanimously. Item 9.4. We good? Item 9.4. There is for the 2021-22 loan approval. This item follows on from a resolution at the February Ordinary Council meeting. Council is being asked to approve approve new borrowings in relation to the Jumeric Dam wall upgrade and the Puddledock Dam raw water transfer system. Can I call for a mover? Thank you, Councillor Gadders. Can I call for
over to you, Mr. Mayor.
And a seconder, Councillor O'Connor. Councillor Gadders, can I?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd actually just like to suggest an alternative motion to this one. It is an item that we've seen before us, and we've had several updates and discussions. So I'd like to suggest some slightly new wording, which I'd provided earlier, which we're now seeing on the screen there. So what I'm suggesting here is, as an overall on this particular point, that we continue to fund the $4 million for the Deferring Dam out of the water fund. And what we do here is accept to take a loan of $5.77 million in terms of the Puddle Dock Raw Dam project. So this is an opportunity, I guess, for us to also then make sure that Mr. General Manager and Mr. Mayor have the credentials to take it forward.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for the amendment?
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to second that amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Packham. Now, Councillor Gadders, you spoke to that. Is there anything further?
I guess I just to add to what I've already said, look, I believe on the evidence that we've been provided, we did actually ask for additional evidence. We received some of that. We are able to see a clearer picture. Ultimately, we are, as a group, looking to protect the water fund that we have, as well as what the forecasted water fund looks like, and therefore our amount of borrowings can be reduced to that 5.77 to make sure that we've covered these projects going forward.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor O'Connor, would you like to speak?
I just don't agree. I believe that we should take our our council officers' advice in this matter. I think that borrowing assists with achieving intergenerational equity in these really big projects, and I'm not comfortable with taking the water reserve down to that level by relying on the water reserve to supply an additional $4 million. I think we need a higher buffer than that, and people need to sleep at night. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. Would any other councillors like to speak to this?
Yeah, I suppose I will. This will give the Councillor Gaddis the chance to respond later on. As was the last council, I was a little bit concerned, had some questions about why we were going against council staff's recommendation on this. And I want to thank the councillors that answered my questions over the last month. It has given me more things to think of. Having left Monday's GM briefing, I still had some concerns about what we were told and what I was given there. And along with Councillor O'Connor, I'm still yet to find a reason for me to support going against the council's recommendation for the loan in total. I'm just trying to. I did ask a question on the emails of whether the proposal that's put up now was considered by the council staff when they came up with their recommendation. And I had a few points here, and I did say I was going to read them out, but I don't know. Because this is only a recommendation, an amendment so far, if needed, I'll read it out to the proposed.
I probably should clarify.
Thing.
I think this, if I were genuinely to follow, and it was my mistake, this is actually the motion.
Okay. So this is not just an amendment to the motion, then the motion will come up?
No, there was a recommendation, and that recommendation
that
was replaced with a motion.
In all due respect, that should have been at the start. Sorry about that. How's my time going? 2 minutes, good. Yeah. I do have some notes in. I'm just trying to find out how to read them out properly so that the right information comes out. So I think I might just, and I do apologise, but I might just read the response I got given. The key reasons for borrowing were the proposed for Generic Dam Wall and Puddle Dock Dam Pipeline include both projects require a significant contribution to Council's Water Fund Reserve. The 21-22 budget projections for the Water Fund Reserve show a significant drawdown on the reserve over the next 3 years due to a large amount of proposed capital works, which are needed to support the current population growth, which is about 1% per annum, and to upgrade ageing infrastructure, e.g. the water treatment plants. When reviewing the projects that were causing the reserve drawdowns, the Generic Dam Wall and Puddle Dock Dam pipeline projects met the criteria for borrowing. Despite the inclusion of borrowings, there remains a projection of a drawdown on the reserves from projected capital works. The aim of the borrowings proposal was to keep the water fund reserve above $6 million at any point in time based on the projections. The projections don't take into account council funding for any water security proposals, the Malpas Dam upgrade, and are based on low population growth, and taking out borrowings to support the level of water fund. Reserve would assist ensuring there is a capacity to avoid significant increases in fees and charges if the revenue that is forecast from water consumption is not realised, and increased proposals to water access charges are not supported, and the current borrowing rates are relatively low, which gives me enough information on what I was looking for. So I'm hoping that the mover of this motion, the amended motion, can match something along those lines with his right of reply when he gets a chance.
Thank you. Before we go to a right of reply, are there any other councillors that wish to speak? Councillor Packham, but I don't know why your light's not on.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, I do now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As seconder of the motion, I appreciate my chance to talk to the topic. I think that Councillor Gaddy's articulated it quite well for what it is at current day terms. This is a legacy project. It's something that was known by the prior council to be needed. It was something that was initiated by the prior council, and back then they decided, well, that they possibly should have borrowed the money, but they didn't proceed with that and didn't give the authority for the council, the GM, to proceed with that. In that meantime, current ratepayers have saved some money in the water fund, and I believe it should be matched with that time period in which this repair was initiated. On the converse, the Puddle Dock thing is a new initiative that's in our current council term, and I do believe in borrowing that fund. I don't believe in burdening our water users with an additional $1.4 million projected in interest burden on the fact that they've already saved the money for it. So if they'd saved the money for it, they won't incur interest if we use it from the water fund. And hence I support the mover of the motion to not proceed with the original and to proceed with A and B as it now stands.
Thank you, Councillor Packham. Councillor Robinson.
And I just wanted to add a couple of other things. I mean, I appreciate that we do have a fair bit of new work planned, including upgrades to our water treatment works, new pumping stations and reservoirs, which obviously might help buffer the output from the treatment plant and therefore increase our capacity. And I'm still hoping that we will be able to attract some 50-50 grant funding for some of these projects, as we've done in the past. And if we do, well and good. We won't ever drop down below, even by a few $100,000 below our $6 million desired reserve. So let's see what we can do. There's a lot of work proposed, and if we can prepare the business case as we're doing for item 10.1, then we may find that we just don't need to borrow this money ever in the future. So let's cross that bridge when we come to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Gadders, a right of reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could maybe just address Councillor Witter's few questions in there, please. The evidence that is given to us in the agenda, page 42, is probably the best way to describe our position. It's a graphic of the water fund over the coming years. There is a value set by council, which is that $6 million number that we're talking about, which is considered to be, the do not cross line in terms of the water fund. Do not go below that particular line. We can see from the evidence that we've been given that as we stand here, looking at the amendment that is on the page, we will not go below that $6 million line. The closest we will come to that is in 2026. So in other words, the amendment that's on the page suggests that the other project, so originally when this was brought to us last month with a value of 9.7 million on it, that we were being asked to borrow the full amount. With additional information, we see that we've already covered a large portion of that with the existing water fund. The water fund will not dip below the 6 million, but we do, however, still need to borrow the 5.7 for the new project that's in our term. So that's why, hopefully that's answered your question a little bit more. Put quite simply, we don't need to borrow the full amount and have the ratepayers and the council cover a large interest bill and service that loan.
Thank you, Councillor Gadders. With no more discussion, let's put this to a vote. The motion that is on the screen, all those in favour? 1, 2, 3. I can't see. Is a yes. So that's 9 for, those against 2. So I declare the motion carried. Thank you, councillors. You all right? Councillor Witters.
Just on that motion, did that yellow A and B then remove the A and B that was written in the original motion, just for clarity?
It wasn't a motion, it was a recommendation. So it was up there on the screen.
Am I just...
So that has been removed from the yellow bit.
Yes. Thank you. The paperwork will catch up. Councillors, we move to 9.5. This is an additional special rate variation. The recent IPART decision to apply a rate peg of 0.7% has caused widespread consternation amongst councils across the state. If enforced, this could adversely impact our service delivery, particularly in the inflationary environment that we operate. The Office of Local Government has allowed councils that received a rate peg of less than 2.5% to apply for an increase. The recommendation on the screen is seeking council's endorsement to prepare an application for an additional special variation. I also would like to note that in the business papers on page 51, there was a figure was transposed, and that is the additional proposed funding. In the business papers, it appears as 356,831. It should be 356,381. So near enough to a $250 difference, but accuracy matters. Councillors, can I call for a mover of the, oh gee, that was a race. I'll give that to Councillor. Okay, Councillor Robinson is moving that motion. Councillor O'Brien is seconding that motion. Councillor Robinson, would you like to speak to that motion?
Very briefly, IPART recommended that councils base their long-term financial modelling on a 2.5% increase. And councils do need time to prepare their budgets, and it'd be very, very hard for council staff if we change it at the very last minute when we're almost into the budget planning. So I believe that it would be only fair on council staff that they put in the application for an SRV to fit in with their previous modelling. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien, anything?
Just got to be done, thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any comment? Councillor O'Connor?
I'm going to vote against this because I've been walking around town and I've been watching the news, and we might be stressed, but individuals in our community also are, and I just don't support this.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, there being no further discussion, we'll put this to a vote. All those in favour? That's 9 that I can see, and so that's 10 those against. 1. I declare the motion carried. We good? Okay, thank you. Councillors, item 9.6, employment zones reform. This item, if adopted, will replace the existing business and industrial zones with 5 new employment zones and 3 supporting zones. The advantages for council are twofold. The additional zones will provide us with greater flexibility, and secondly, the New South Wales Department of Planning and Environment is doing much of the heavy lifting from an administrative point of view. We have a recommendation on the screen. Can I call for a mover of that? Councillor McMichael, you won that one, and a seconder. Councillor Gadders won that round. Thank you. Councillor McMichael, would you like to speak to this?
Look, I'd just like to say that I think it's terrific that we're taking advantage of the Department of Environment's suggestion, and that the staff are working hard to amalgamate the new plans and the new numbers into our plans, which we fixed last week. So I think it's terrific, and that we do it.
Thank you, Councillor McMichael. Councillor Gadders, anything to add? Councillors, anyone? Well, with no further discussion, we'll move to a vote on this. All those in favour? Thank you. 10. I can see Councillor Redwood's hand, so I declare that motion carried unanimously. Councillors, we move now into the 10 items, environment and infrastructure. So item 10.1, the integrated water cycle management strategy, water security options and assessment. This item from page 56 onwards in our agenda is at the core of the growth of our region, in that without sufficient water supplies, our region will stagnate. Significant work to identify the most appropriate water security strategies that align with our ambitious growth objectives have been undertaken. Council is being asked 4 things. It's being asked to note the report from the New South Wales Public Works Authority, note that council staff have lodged inquiries to acquire Oakey Dam, adopt the recommendation to proceed with the development of 2 options to secure our water well into the future, and the 4th one is to prepare appropriate business cases. Can I seek a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I'd like to move a slightly amended motion, which is down on the screen below.
So this will become the motion?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So councillors, Councillor Robinson's amendment has some additional wording in there, just in item D. Oh, sorry, we only got it's okay. So now do I have a seconder for Councillor Robinson's? Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. Councillor Robinson, would you like to speak to your motion? Councillor O'Connor, you might just need to.
Well, before I do, at the pre-meeting briefing, I asked a question on notice about the Gyra Dam, which was passed on to me by the Ratepayers Association, and I wondered if we could have an answer to that question before I speak to this motion. Thank you.
So I guess through me, you'd like to speak to Chief Officer Manners. Could you make a comment on that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Councillor Robinson, to clarify, the question was whether the Gyra dams and upgrades to those dams was included as part of the Public Works Advisory Report that is forming part of this report today. Now, the answer I can say as part of this report is no, because it was previously explored as part of the water security and drought emergency response that was provided in 2019. So what was considered at that time was a cost-benefit analysis between the Malpas pipeline and the Gyra Dam's upgrades, among some other options. At that time, communications were put out to the community around the cost-benefit analysis, showing that while each of the options that were considered were going to cost about $10 million to construct, modelling indicated that they are short-term solutions and wouldn't provide the same level of long-term future-proofing for the region as a pipeline linking Malpas Dam and Gyra water treatment plant. Does that satisfactorily answer the question for you?
Yes, thank you. It was really something that I think the community wanted to know, and they may want to know more when we have the business case and we prepare the go forward for public consultation. So yes, I mean, every bit of information we have is very, very useful. And I'll just briefly speak to my changes to the motion, which is really that the revised motion provides some additional ideas that I'm sure that our community will want to be considered when we finally go out to public consultation. For example, just looking at the current water saving measures, whether if we have additional subsidies for water saving measures, how that will affect our supply and demand. We also want to look at environmental sustainability as well as financial stability. And the other thing that really was looking at, how the impact of the cost-benefit analysis of smart water meters, because it was predicted in the original October 2020 business paper to actually produce quite a substantial saving. So this revised motion just provides a more holistic approach to looking at the water supply and demand, and will really in the end long give us a much better business case and a much better and easier path towards community consultation and getting everybody behind all the measures. And it may, for example, be that, as some people have suggested to me, that when we look at the revised case, and I've heard quite a fair bit of support for this, that maybe we will want to raise Malpas Wall before we actually do the OK Road developments. So that's something that can be considered in the business case when we look at it more holistically. So let's just hope we have a few more ideas and these can be passed on and give us a stronger and better business case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor O'Connor, you were the seconder, so I'd like to throw to you.
Yes, I don't really want to add anything to what Councillor Robinson has said. I support her amendment. In relation to the raising of or the possible raising of the Gyra Dam wall, I was going to put up an amendment today, but after discussions with the Mayor, I just want to put the Chamber on notice that I will probably be putting up a notice of motion for the next meeting. Look, I'm very grateful to Mr Manners for his explanation as to the 2019 consideration of the Gyra pipeline or the Malpas to Gyra pipeline as an either or, with the raising of the Gyra Reservoir's walls. I think a lot of, excuse the pun, but a lot of water's flowed under the bridge since then. And I am most aware that the Gyra community is still quite concerned about a fresh appraisal of its desire to have the Gyra Dam, the Gyra Reservoir wall raising being part of the PWA considerations, part of the cost-benefit analysis now. It's probably a matter to be discussed later, but the effectiveness of the pipeline and the need possibly for redundancy to be built in to protect the Gyra community. I think those are the interests that the Gyra community now have, that they would like to see some redundancy and buffer for their own supply. They believe, as has been represented to me, that this is not going to affect the calculations in relation to the overall situation with Malpas, and it's falling short of sustainable yield. But they have concerns, but they'll be raised at the next meeting, so don't clobber me when I raise a notice of motion on this subject, because it's been done in consultation with the Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson, and your foreshadowing of the notice of motion is noted. Councillor Packham.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to foreshadow an amendment to the proposed amendment, if I may. In my belief, where we're going here is too prescriptive and too descriptive. I think it's only going to stymie the progress towards water security for our region and injects unnecessary duplication of already informed and well-documented processes surrounding this type of initiative and this type of reporting process. In my mind, the amendment, as proposed, is a race to the bottom of the barrel and designed to restrict our ability to achieve net water surpluses for our future. I think, in my opinion, my amendment would be to stop at the word business case. I think there are professionals in our abound that know what a business case is and what needs to be in and out of a business case. And I think we've been too descriptive and too prescriptive in that process. And it may, in fact, slow down, one, and two, stymie the actual broadness of the report that we could actually get in a well-documented business case.
Thank you, Councillor Packham. This is actually the motion, so I'd suggest, and I don't want to say, I'd suggest if you would like to make an amendment, we can make an amendment, but I know you have foreshadowed an amendment. I will just give you the opportunity. Do you want to propose an amendment or foreshadowing, depending on where we go?
I would like the amendment.
Thank you. If I may suggest, would it be worthwhile if we split this and voted on items A, B and C, and then we considered item D? This is a suggestion.
Mr Mayor, I think the opportunity to optimise Councillor Robinson's amendment would be to stop at the word business case, and if Councillor Robinson would accept that at this point in time, we would proceed on that basis.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think I will leave it as written, because even though it is prescriptive, I think that, you know, when we leave it far too open, like, for example, the first PWA analysis recommended only raising the dam wall by 3.5 metres rather than 6 metres. And it was only because we had to really discuss it that with the option of 6.5 metres was included.
Thank you, Council. I will throw back to you because...
Point of order, Mr Mayor. It's got nothing to do with this discussion, but it is a point of order, and maybe I've missed it. I was daydreaming and missed it. When a motion is moved, and I need, maybe ask for clarity this from the GM or whoever, when a motion is put and an amendment is moved, I think we should be voting on the amendment of the motion, which then becomes to make it the substantive motion. If you move a motion with an amendment, it shouldn't make it the substantive motion. It should be in a vote on the amendment to the substantive motion, so that, and that's why I got confused earlier, because if with the motion's been moved with D now becoming the original D, but then we're not voting to see whether we want the original D or the second D. I don't think, and that's where I've been confused a couple of times today, and it comes back to Councillor Packham's foreshadowed motion. We should really be voting on if we want D to become part of the substantive motion, and then if it fails, and Councillor Packham's foreshadowed motion can then be brought in. But maybe I can get some clarity on that.
Let me have an attempt, and I will beg everyone's indulgence. Councillor Robinson, what Councillor Robinson put first was the motion. We had a recommendation on the screen, but what Councillor Robinson put forward was the motion. A handful of people have spoken in favour of Councillor Robinson's motion. Councillor Packham foreshadowed an amendment, and I must admit I probed him for clarity from my end, and that's as far as, and then I might have probed a little further. So it really is up to Councillor Packham whether he wishes to put forward an amendment or not. Sorry, Councillor O'Connor, could you just...
Oh, sorry. I think we started off with an amendment from Councillor Robinson. Now it's up. She's councillor, and then there's a further amendment, which in fact was a deletion proposed by Councillor Packham, which was not agreed to by the mover of the initial amendment, which was Councillor Robinson, seconded me. So therefore, I think properly, this is just my view. Don't ignore it with your leisure, but I suspect we should put Councillor Robinson's full amendment or break it up to assist Councillor Packham, because he really only wants to interfere with the second part. I think it's B.
No, D.
Oh, D, right, I can't see. So I think that might be a sensible way to proceed, but you're the chair.
Thank you. As the chair, I will just throw to the General Manager, who I believe is watching eagerly and might have had an impartial view on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the way you described it is essentially right, perhaps a little bit of nuancing around words. So the motion that we have before Council now is the motion that was moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor O'Connor, with that Part D. Councillor Packham is either foreshadowing a motion or potentially putting an amendment up. I guess subject, so foreshadowing a motion would be this would end up going to the vote. If it's won, it becomes the motion and we move on. If it's lost, then Councillor Packham would put up his foreshadowed motion, or Councillor Packham can put up an amendment as you talked about with what you said. Hope that helps.
Thank you. That does help, because it clarifies that what I said was right.
I think it actually agreed with me too.
Love it when everyone's right. But back to the matter at hand. Councillor Packham, are you foreshadowing a new motion, or would you like to move an amendment?
I'd like to move an amendment, understanding that Part A, B and C says, talking to Councillor, is that it's a Oakey River 25 and a 6.5 and a Styx River 25 and a 6.5, and there is no mention in those recommendations about alternatives for 3 metres. So that's where it is, and I would like to see us do a business case without the prescription and the description, so which either locks us in or just gets unwieldy, in my opinion.
Thank you. So, for clarity, you would like to, your motion would be to, sorry, your amendment is to vote on A, B, C, or is your amendment to just D in with the whole lot?
Dealing with a lot with my preferred D.
Thank you. Okay, we now have an amendment. Do we have a seconder for that amendment as described by Councillor Packham? Thank you, Councillor McMichael. Councillor Packham, your amendment, would you like to speak to that?
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the opportunity. I think I have spoken at length on the issue, and I would like to see it go to a vote, please.
Thank you.
With respect, Mr. Mayor, can we vote that last bit in green separately to the rest?
That was an option which Councillor Packham declined.
Is it actually his right to decline? I would have thought the mover of the amendment and the mover of the material that Councillor Packham's amendment is trying to delete actually rejected his amendment. So I don't know that Councillor Packham has the right to prevent Councillor Robinson's full amendment from being voted on. And as there doesn't seem to be debate about the yellow bit, perhaps we could just vote on that and then slog it out on the green.
Thank you. As the General Manager outlined, Councillor Robinson's wasn't an amendment, it was a substantive motion. The only amendment we have is what has appeared from Councillor Packham. So we now need to deal with the amendment, and whether that's won or lost, then we can go back to Councillor Robinson's motion.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, would anyone else like to speak on what's before there? Councillor Gathers.
So to be clear, I'm speaking for what was green, but now we've just painted the screen with everything green. But anyway, I'm speaking to Mr. Packham, Councillor Packham's piece. Look, I fully support it. I think there is enough words and brevity in there to get the point across. I will speak to the yellow section proposed by Councillor Robinson in that section. So I'm saying I'm supporting Mr. Packham's.
Thank you. So would anyone else like to speak on the amendment?
Look, I would like to say that I think with discussions afterwards and between it, we can organise what needs to go in and what needs to go out, and with the help of the staff and with the help of the councillors' ideas, that anything that's useful and not useful can be put in later.
Thank you, Councillor McMichael. So, councillors, if there is no further discussion, we are going to vote on Councillor Packham's amendment. And can we, and if that is, if that's won or lost, then we will work out where we go from next. So, based on Councillor Packham's amendment, all those in favour, please raise your hands. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9. That's 10. Those against, for clarity, thank you. I declare the amendment carried. So that amendment is now the substantive motion that we are voting on. Councillor Packham, as you've moved it, do you need to speak further?
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the opportunity, but I decline.
Thank you. Councillor McMichael, you moved it. No, thank you. Councillors, any discussion? So with the motion that is on the screen, let's put that to a vote. All those in favour? We're not at an auction. Thank you. And Todd, thank you, councillors. I declare that motion carried. Well done. Councillors, we now come to the last item. I declare it carried unanimously, by the way. Yep. We now come to the last item on the agenda, the Traffic Advisory Committee. The minutes for that. Council is asked to endorse the agenda and minutes of the Traffic Advisory Committee. Details are on page 64 of the agenda. Can I ask for a mover of that, please?
Should be.
Thank you, Councillor McMichael. Can I?
I'm on the Traffic Committee, I'll move it.
That's why I was looking at you. Councillor Gadders is seconding that. Councillors, Councillor McMichael, would you like to speak to that?
Most of the reports are about things like Anzac Day and the usual kind of road closures. There's also Tour de Rocks, which is slightly shortened.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gadders. No, thank you. Other councillors, any discussion? Councillors, let's put this to a vote. All those in favour of endorsing the agenda and minutes, thank you. I declare that carried unanimously. Councillors, that is the end of our meeting. I thank you very much. We genuinely did pass some big things. This really was one of those steps towards getting great stuff done for the region. So I thank you for your input. I thank you for your debate. And that is really what the community deserves and expects of us. So thank you, councillors.
Happy birthday for last week.
Thank you.